Hey, good afternoon, everybody. It is Monday, December 7th, I say as I briefly look at the calendar to catch the date. And you are here on Litvak Leadership Live, and we are talking with my good friend Doug Hedrick about, oh gosh, so many things, whether it be biotechnology, the military, chaplaincy, or how to balance being bivocational. How are you, Doug?
I'm great. How you presented that, I'm kind of exhausted, to be honest with you. So maybe that's going to be indicative of our conversation. We'll see.
Anyone that I know who has been bivocational has always talked about it's a lot because you either don't do either right or you do both of them right, and it's two full-time jobs.
So yeah, that's for sure. And I don't know that I would recommend it for everybody, but this is kind of how the Lord has wired me. So I've been doing it for a long time.
So which came first, the biotech and the secular career, or the military and the faith career being a chaplain?
I'd say the civilian biotech part was first, but not much. I had gone to graduate school in Virginia and had basically decided I was going to stay out there, but through a course of events with my dad being diagnosed with terminal cancer, at that point my now wife and I moved back to Indiana to be with him and help attend to some of the things that we need to do to kind of prepare for all that. So during all that, I got involved really with my civilian career, kind of kicked off, but really shortly after, I got a direct commission into the Army as a chaplain.
And first of all, before I forget, thank you for your service. And to me, it's like double service because it's service in the military, but then service in a chaplaincy. I mean, I would not say that is harder than being out on the front lines, but you're dealing with everyone's mental, emotional, and spiritual state. So thank you for that also. How did you choose to go into being a chaplain?
Well, I would say after it was clear of what I had decided to follow Christ as my Lord and Savior in my early 20s, shortly after college, I got really involved in kind of my local ministry, my local church, in a very large singles group in Indianapolis. And through my involvement, through what others would say, and just through my own development, it became really clear of I must say, I guess, a divine calling, if you will, a real strong passion, interest for this work. And I knew that I needed some more training, so I got an opportunity to go to graduate school a few years after, through all this a couple years later. And really that shaped it, and that really confirmed it when I was in seminary.
So how did being in seminary confirm it to you?
Yeah, interesting enough, where I went to seminary was in Norfolk, Virginia. Okay. And if you've ever been there, if you want to talk about a military mecca, I mean, it had Army was there, Marines there, particularly the Navy was there, East Coast Naval Base is located there. So I had met with some folks in that community through both where I went to church, through some connections that my wife had from Michigan, and actually a couple of folks in Navy SEAL Team 6 of all things. Got connected with them, and then I did an internship when I was in seminary, and the gentleman I worked with used to be a chaplain in the military. So all those conversations, interactions really just kind of lit a fire in me and said, this really is I'm well suited for this based on what I thought, what people were telling me, suggesting, encouraging me. So I checked into it then. And then after I moved back to Indianapolis, that's when all the paperwork was finalized and I got my commission.
That is just amazing. Now, at the same time, you were working in account management or sales for a biotech firm?
Well, shortly after college, I was selling real estate as a broker in Indianapolis. And I pursued that for a few years, had some success with it. But my wife and I had decided that at that point we're going to start, having children. And once we had our first child, going into our second, it was really clear that I needed kind of a different lifestyle. Some decisions need to be made differently. And someone had suggested to me, a friend, that I needed to get into biotech. It was a strong industry, growing. And they thought, because of my skills in selling and working with people in leadership, it made sense to kind of go this direction. And I gave it a shot. And I've been there ever since.
So they're both full-time. How do you balance your time between the two?
Well, I have, for the last 20 years, I've been in the Army Reserves. So technically, they tell you it's part-time or partially part-time.
Yeah.
But I don't think that's really true. That's a great marketing ad, but I'm not so sure if that's really the truth, especially as you move up in rank and responsibility. It really becomes every bit of a part-time, if not sometimes a little bit more, depending on the type of year and what's going on around the world. But I tell you, I've gotten really good, and I've been forced to do it, but I think pretty good at time management. So in my job, if I had to go to a corporate building and be there all day, every day, for the last 20 years, it would have been really tough for me to be able to do both. And Sean, as you know, in the sales side of the world, in a lot of ways, there's some flexibility. You could be in a car going between appointments. You can work from home, and you have a little bit more say on how you manage your time. So I've been able to build into that downtime, making calls, checking my computer, doing meetings virtually, et cetera. That it would have been really difficult had I been working in a different environment.
So I see, looking at your LinkedIn profile, and this really, the first two recommendations one is within biotechnology, and one is within the military. And what I found interesting, because I read them in the order in which they're posted, is that this gentleman says that you have successfully engaged all key stakeholders in developing productive relationships. And when I think of key stakeholders, I'm thinking quite often of the C-suite in individuals. And it's really difficult sometimes to get a strong, clear answer from them, other than the bottom line answer, not the steps in between. How do you engage people like that to get them to open up a little bit more?
Well, some of it just takes time and just persistency. Those are two foundational components that typically are always going to have to be present. Just stay in the course, being persistent, working with folks. When you say stakeholders, it's not just, in addition to C-suite folks, they typically answer to a board or other folks that they're working for. So it's good to establish relationships outside of the C-suite sphere, so that you can get recommendations and make connections that others would refer you to them, and give you kind of some, a reference, or say, hey, you need to talk to this guy. He's credible, he's trustworthy, and it makes sense. So I do a lot on developing a network of relationships outside of just the C-suite that have impact, or can speak to them to say, hey, you need to open the door and have an opportunity to speak with Doug. So I think it's this networking properly, connecting with the right folks outside of the C-suite, and just staying persistent. But I guess I'll end with saying that the more credibility I build, and the more they realize that I do in fact know what I'm talking about, I think they're more apt to want to talk to me, especially if they know I have, in a lot of ways, I know what they need. I know what their triggers are. I know what's important to them. And if I can address those things and speak from their world, so to speak, it goes a long way.
So let's talk about networking for a moment, because, there used to be all sorts of in-person networking events, and those are very far and few between now. What have you found to be some of the most effective ways to network with people while we work through the circumstances in which we find ourselves?
I guess it's kind of like, it depends on what your end goal is and what your objective is on why you're networking. whether you're looking for a job or you're looking at making more impact in the world in which you work, it's kind of looking at, if you draw kind of a diagram on paper and you look at, well, these are the people I really need to meet, impact, or influence. And then you kind of draw your little lines beyond them, little trees or whatever you want to call it, that says, these are the people that ultimately will have some level of voice into what they're doing. And then the more you define on what that network looks outside of, your core individuals that you need to impact, then you go out and you make, you figure out how you're going to contact them. And so I do a lot on LinkedIn. I do a ton of emails. I've got a pretty good network now, and I'll call them and say, hey, these are some things I'm trying to get done. Who are the people I need to talk with? And so I reach out to them, and you just kind of keep building, and you want to make sure you're recording all this as you put your big tree, your networking tree together. And that becomes a little easier because now you can define it because you can actually see it.
So pivoting for a moment to the military, I found it really interesting what this one gentleman had said, that you were able to help those within your organization flourish in challenges of culture, socioeconomic situations, and geography. How'd you do that?
Are you sure that's for me?
Yeah.
I'm just kidding.
He cultivated a climate that allowed for the Army's largest sustainment brigade to flourish and excel through various cultural, social, economic, and geographic challenges.
Oh, you know what? And I could talk a long time about that, but I would say that, people by and large, no matter what your background is, where you come from, what color of skin you have, people want to know that a couple of things. One, that they matter. And number two, that they actually have something that they can contribute, that they can do something significant in what they're doing. So I care about people, and I care about what they have to say. And one of the things he's referencing is that a lot of people were feeling like they were disenfranchised. And, in the military, how the structure and the rank, sometimes you can kind of feel like you really don't matter that much, depending on if you're of lower rank and your position is of lower, priority, if you will. Sure. But I didn't come across that way. I made sure everyone felt like they were equal in a lot of ways, that their opinion matters. And we had a lot of, phone calls. We had a lot of, how do we call it? Sensing sessions, if you will. That's kind of a common term, to make sure that all the voices were being heard, and they had an opportunity to make suggestions on the direction that the organization, how we went in the future. So I guess I'll just encapsulate by saying this. I gave everyone, as best I could, a voice in the decision-making process. And that really made a difference for a lot of them.
I can see that. One of your accolades from this same gentleman was that as a team, y'all were able to reduce suicides from 5 a year to 0 within the group by utilizing 9/11 chaplain initiatives. What is that?
Well, the program that we came up with, it was basically saying that everyone had a very clear understanding of who their people were, and understanding that once various risk factors were identified, there was a call list, and they had a very clear understanding of what they needed to do next, and then what would happen after that. So we had different scenarios that we had put together, and they had a very clear understanding what their steps were, depending on what happened first. So their mission was very clear. And secondly, is the response rate. We made sure that if there's anything that happened, anything popped up, that they were required within a couple hours to make contact with everybody, whether it was by person, or by phone, whatever. And then once they had made contact, they had a series of questions and things that they would cover. And if there was additional triage that needed to happen beyond there, we made sure that people were taken care of to get the help they needed. So we really reduced the gaps. And the issues with suicide often is there's intervention is not always quick enough. And so we made sure that the intervention really happened quickly, and people were clear about what needed to happen once intervention happened.
I mean, I don't know anyone that hasn't been affected by suicide in some way, whether it's been a family member or a friend or the child of a friend or, you know, an associate of some kind. And I guess the phrase that I've used when I've talked with people about it is, to me, suicide is making a permanent decision about temporary circumstances. I don't mean to sound cold when I say that, but I think it's something I say to remind myself also. How do you communicate that or get people to understand that, you know, when they do have challenges in life, you know, everything is temporary and it's not going to be a certain way forever? I mean, is my statement valid? Let's start there.
I'd say it's valid, except unless you're the person going through it.
Okay.
Because, you know, when you're going through it, and I can relate to some extent because some of my own challenges in life, I've listened to the voices that said that you're not worth much. Your life, you know, your life's not going to, you don't really count. You're never going to get through this. And let's just end the pain and get it over with. So if you listen to that voice long enough, it will have potentially long-term ramification, meaning, to your point, you can make that short-term decision and that's it. You think you've conquered it because you've gotten rid of the pain. But typically, a lot of these folks have been dealing with this thing, you know, what they're struggling with it's not just happened in a couple of months. It could be for a few years, right?
Okay.
So it's, you know, they want a way out. They want to get rid of the pain, struggle, the thoughts in their heads, and life just has not worked for them, and they don't have hope. And it becomes a point where it becomes hopeless, and you feel like you're not going to get out of it, and your back's against the wall. You know, it's fight or flight, and unfortunately, sometimes, you know, they make that unfortunate decision. So it's really helping folks to see their life from a new set of thinking, a new set of, it's not, you know, the emotions have an effect, but it's getting them from a spiritual guy, it's being transformed. It's helping people see life and their situation from a different, higher perspective. So they realize that these are issues and things that can be dealt with, but they've got to surround themselves with the right voice, the right people, the right plan to be able to move forward. And when you're in the thick of things, it's really hard to get beyond that and think differently.
Go on a little bit more about that transformation. How do you help people to understand that they are transformed and they don't have to be who they have always been?
Well, I don't know. And we've spent millions of dollars in the military, spent millions of dollars, multiple millions of dollars to try to come up with a way to correct or to reduce suicide trends. And, you know, at times there is a positive trend switch. But by and large, in my own bias, my own beliefs, I don't know, outside of a relationship with Christ, Jesus Christ, and being transformed from the inside out, can anyone fully change or see life long-term from a different vantage point, from a different set of mindset to change, you know, what you feel is right, your new identity, how you think about a situation, your purpose in life. That all has to happen from a transformational experience that, at least from my experience, only Jesus Christ can provide, because that in itself, that's where power is found, in that relationship. And that's how people ultimately change. Whether you're dealing with suicide or, you know, relationships, you name it, it's really that is becoming different, new, and changed from the inside out. And for me, that's the only answer that really ultimately is the answer. So
going down that same path, I mean, I've heard it, you know, preached for years amongst most, from most, about Jesus being Savior. I've heard it preached from a minority about Jesus being Lord. And as I have explored that more, because people will say Lord and Savior, but they really focus on Savior. You know what I'm saying?
Oh yeah.
As opposed to Lord. And the more that I have embraced having Jesus Christ as Lord of my life, quite frankly, the happier I am, the less stress I experience. So as a chaplain, how do you get people to understand that Lord is not lording over, but Lord is supporting and encouraging and all those things that a Lord can do for someone?
Well, one of my favorite passages is talking about the Lord is my shepherd. I shall not be in want. He makes me lie down in green pastures. He takes me or walks me along quiet waters. That reflects the relationship between a shepherd and his sheep.
Mm-hmm.
And the Lord piece is that we recognize that the Lord has it's his guidance, is his direction for how our life should be lived. And by his example and by his guidance and instructions, if we choose to follow that, the lordship, we choose to follow his example, we choose to follow what he says is important, and we walk that out, there we will find the healing, the hope, and the freedom that all of us long for, that will help dramatically when we're dealing with life's, biggest struggles, suicide, as one of them. But being Lord means that we are going to surrender our right to our lives and thinking that we have all the answers, and say, no, there's actually someone else that really knows a little bit more than I do, because he's the one who created us. He's the one who's created the earth and everything in it. So he has a much better understanding of what right should look like and what direction we should go in life. And it's just saying, I'm going to submit to that. I believe that you have better answers than I do, and I'm going to follow after that. And I'm going to give you I'm going to submit my decision-making to you. That is my Lord. So in some sense, if the military is it's not the same, but it's similar, because someone will say to me, hey, sir, what would you like me to do? And that's a big, it's a big responsibility, because I'm telling him or her is, if you do this, if you go in this direction, if you coordinate, structure your career this way, based on what I know and what example I've lived and shown, you can have a better career. You can have a more fulfilling career. You can be safe as you do your job. You can protect your shoulders more effectively this way. So they are looking to me as a way to say, I'm going to trust that Chaplain Hedrick has the answers. Well, it's not me, it's God, but he's looking to me for guidance. And that's what we do when we give Jesus putting him as Lord of our life. We're going to follow his example. We're going to follow what he has to say.
So do you find now in, and during COVID, and frankly, anyone who watches this knows I hate the COVID word. I consistently say the circumstances in which we find ourselves, which, if you haven't figured it out by now, people, is code for COVID, and everything surrounding it. But today we're not going to go political. But in the circumstances in which we find ourselves in this age of civil unrest and pandemic, to people or individuals within the military, are they more open to Christ and your chaplaincy, or has it made them colder to it?
No, there's definitely, when the challenges are high, when they're in the heat of battle, when they're dealing with very stressful situations, clearly there's always the harvest is a little bit more ripe for the message that I preach, clearly. And it's the same whether you're in the military or otherwise, right? When life's going well, you're making your money, relationships are good, then, we think we can do it on ourselves. We've got it all figured out. But, it's, and I'm not going to say this correctly, but over the years, usually people, when they're in the foxhole, and there's some great concerns going on. Their life's in danger in some capacity. There's usually more of an openness for what happens if their life were to end that day. So that's been some of, I guess, fruitful times, but with pandemic, family issues, economic struggles, challenges, there's clearly people need, not only hope, they need answers.
Yeah.
And if I can provide good answers for them that they're, at least willing to entertain and consider and follow, and they see a difference, there's clearly a much more of an open opportunity than I would have had otherwise.
So do you find in your non-military life, in the secular world of biotech, since individuals know that you're a chaplain in the Army, have they sought you out for an encouraging word, an ear to how does that work, blending the two like that?
Well, you know what, if our purpose, it doesn't really matter what we do. If we are an ambassador for Christ, if we are God's representative to the world, whether you're doing a podcast like this, or I'm in a factory line or selling widgets, we are to be the aroma of Christ no matter where we are. So it's afforded me, yes, people generally like, wow, you do this? That's pretty cool. And it gives me, in a lot of ways, a platform that I may or may not have otherwise, but I would like to think that clearly, and I can give you examples at some point or whenever, but the reality is it's definitely opened doors for me because I'm a pastor. And whether I'm wearing a uniform or not, people generally are, has given me opportunities to pray for. I prayed for many, many people in offices, you name it, because of this. They've sought me out for questions. I've done a ton of counseling in those environments that I probably would not have done otherwise, had them not knowing what I do, because I think there's some credibility with that. I would like to think, and some experience. So people sought me out. I've married a ton of people, and people have asked me because of my, military experience as a chaplain. Yeah,
your nephew, and Andrew has become a pastor. As a matter of fact, he married my son and my daughter-in-law. So
I heard that. I hope he did a decent job.
He did do a decent job. He the audience to crack up a little bit at different times. It was definitely surreal. Maybe we'll have Andrew on here one day.
Yeah.
So as we're winding towards the end, we've got about 2.5 or 3 minutes left. What word do you have for the viewers who are both here live and for those that are going to watch on replay? Because we have a great replay audience that watches on their own time frame. What do you want them to take away from Doug Hedrick that will encourage them in their day for the balance of the year and moving into 21? I'm setting the bar high for you. So
yeah,
looking for a power statement here.
And I only have 2 minutes to do this. Oh man.
About 2, 3.
My wife, who's got legal training, she always would tell me in the past, Doug, just land the plane. I'm the preacher, and she'd say, just land the plane. So I got to be brief here. You know what? And I'm glad you asked that. And I'll say it this way. Everybody listening, well, all of us, but for those who are listening, I just want to say that God has a special plan for your life. He has a unique purpose for your life. And no matter where you are, and I know most people are disengaged and frustrated with what they do in life, and wish they were doing something else. And it takes some time to find that. I mean, here I am now 25 years later, and I feel like the life of Abraham and Joseph and others who took a long time between the time that God says, this is what I've called you to, but yet it took years later to fulfill it. And I can honestly say from my own life and experience that I really did not like the years in between, because I thought it was a waste. I wondered, why am I doing this when I really feel more called to do this? And I feel like I can do more. But it has been the best training ground, at least for me personally, than I could have had otherwise. And now that I look back, it has been amazing that God has used the university of adversity as my best university, and has taught me so much about my character that needed to be changed, becoming more like Christ, has built skill sets that I would have never had before. And now that I see all this kind of converging, I'm really excited about the next half of my life and where God's taken me. And I realize that all of this, when God says that he uses all things in our life for his purpose, that clearly it is a true statement. So everyone has a unique purpose. We're uniquely designed, and God doesn't waste any of our experiences. He uses them for good, and just to trust in the process and delight ourselves in the Lord as we're doing it, because one day soon that will all be made clear and make sense. And God's going to use all of these things for what we have been longing for, and our dreams still can come true. No matter if you're 35 or 65, the desires that God's given you, especially if they've stayed with you, he will bring it about. And I just want to encourage everybody with that, because it's true, and I've seen it in my own life. And I'm just so grateful for God's faithfulness and getting me to where I am today, because I was nowhere near where I needed to be for God to be able to use me in the way he wants to use me, because I was so selfish and so me-centered that I need to be broken of that. And I'm so grateful that I've had to go through what I had, because now my heart's right and I want to do things for the right reason.
Come on now. You said that in like all of 3.5 minutes.
Oh, yay.
Very well. That's
all right.
And it's inspiring to people.
Oh.
And as I'm sitting here listening to you, I am just realizing, I know what my callings in life have been, and we're not going to go over that today. But I have been assigning scriptures to them, and just hearing you speak has really been an encouragement of this own personal process that I'm going through. And I'm sure if this conversation has been encouraging for me, I know it's been encouraging for our viewers. So thank you so much for agreeing to be on the show today, Doug.
Oh yeah, it's been a pleasure. Thanks for the opportunity. I really appreciate it.
Absolutely. So that's our show for today. This was Litvak Leadership Live. We'll be back tomorrow with another guest and another topic. And I hope everyone has a great day. Be blessed.